The throne room of the Xarveth Empire was designed to intimidate entire civilizations. Its ceiling arched so high it disappeared into shadows, lit only by rings of molten orange energy that floated like captured suns. The polished obsidian floor reflected every movement like a dark mirror, forcing anyone who stood upon it to see themselves small and insignificant beneath imperial power. This was where empires bent the knee. This was where rebellions ended. And today, it was where humanity was supposed to break. Captain Elias Ward stood alone in the center of that vast chamber, restrained by shimmering gravitic binds that locked his arms to his sides. His combat armor was cracked, blackened from orbital bombardment and close-quarter fighting. The blue insignia of Earth's defense fleet was scorched but still visible on his chest plate. He had refused to remove it, even captured, even beaten, even surrounded by the most powerful alien empire the galaxy had known in centuries. Around him, hundreds of Xarveth nobles watched from rising tiers carved into the walls, their tall, elegant forms glowing faintly with natural bioluminescence that shifted between amber and gold. Their expressions carried amusement, curiosity, and above all, superiority. Humanity had resisted longer than expected. Yes, but resistance was not victory. Resistance was merely delayed. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a throne of living alloy that pulsed like a mechanical heart, the Emperor of Xarveth leaned forward. His armor shimmered like molten copper, and his elongated crown of energy arched above his head in a symbol of dominion. His presence alone radiated authority so heavy it felt physical. Captain Elias Ward. The Emperor's amplified voice echoed through the chamber, smooth and deliberate. Commander of Europa Station, destroyer of 3 Xarveth cruisers, responsible for the deaths of over 9,000 Imperial soldiers. A faint murmur rippled through the audience. You fought well for a primitive species. Laughter followed, echoing against the towering walls like metallic thunder. Elias did not bow. He did not respond. His jaw tightened, eyes forward, unyielding. The Emperor's gaze sharpened. You destroyed your own orbital cannons to deny us their capture. You detonated your station rather than surrender strategic command. You cost us time, resources, pride. His voice lowered slightly. Today, you will serve a greater purpose. You will be the final image your species remembers before it submits fully to our rule. With a subtle gesture of his clawed hand, a circular execution platform began rising from the black floor beneath Elias' feet, glowing lines etching into place around him. Then, unexpectedly, there was movement near the side entrance to the throne hall. At first it was subtle, just hurried footsteps against polished stone, but within seconds, the sound broke protocol entirely. Guards turned, nobles shifted, and before anyone could intercept her, a smaller figure darted between armored sentinels and ran straight toward the execution circle. Princess Liara, daughter of the Emperor, heir to the Xarveth throne. She was young by imperial standards, her bioluminescence softer than the hardened glow of the court elites. Silver blue patterns traced along her skin. Instead of the aggressive orange favored by warriors, she was not armored, she was not guarded, and she did not hesitate. She crossed the sacred boundary of the execution floor and ran directly to the human. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Before the guards could react, she wrapped her arms around Elias' restrained torso. The gravitic binds flickered under the unexpected interference of royal energy signatures, destabilizing for a fraction of a second. The hall went silent, not the casual quiet of curiosity, but the suffocating silence of shock so complete it felt like time had fractured. Liara. The Emperor's voice cut through the stillness, no longer amused. Return to your position. She did not move. Instead, she pressed her forehead lightly against Elias' armored chest and whispered words that the throne room's acoustics carried farther than she intended. He's mine. The silence deepened. Elias' breath caught. Around them, nobles stared in disbelief. To claim ownership in Xarveth culture was not romantic, it was protective. It was binding. It invoked ancient royal law older than the empire itself. The law of claim safeguarded chosen individuals under imperial bloodline authority. It was meant for political alliances, strategic assets, rare beings of value. It had never been used on a conquered enemy. It had certainly never been used on a human. The Emperor rose slowly from his throne, and the movement alone caused several nobles to lower their gazes. You dare invoke the law of claim, he said, his voice dangerously calm. On a prisoner of war. Liara lifted her head, her silver blue glow intensifying. He is not a prisoner, she replied steadily. He is under my protection. A ripple of outrage spread through the chamber. Advisors leaned toward one another, whispering fiercely. Military commanders clenched their armored fist. For the Emperor to deny her publicly would weaken royal tradition. For him to accept it would humiliate the empire before its own court. Elias finally spoke, his voice rough but firm. Princess, You don't know what you're doing. She glanced at him briefly, and there was something in her eyes he recognized, not naivety, not rebellion, but conviction. Yes, she said softly. I do. The Emperor descended the steps of his throne platform slowly, each footstep echoing across the hall. Explain yourself, he demanded. Liara turned to face him fully. Though she did not release Elias. Humans fight not because they believe they will win, she said clearly, projecting her voice to the chamber. They fight because they believe surrender is worse than death. We call them primitive, yet they destroyed their own defenses to deny us advantage. They chose sacrifice over submission. That is not weakness. Her glow brightened. That is strength. Murmurs shifted tone from outrage to uneasy thought. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Strength without victory is meaningless. Not always, she countered. Strength inspires. Strength spreads. You conquered their fleets, yes, but their colonies continue to resist. Their civilians sabotage our supply lines. Their soldiers refuse collaboration. If you execute him, he becomes a martyr. If you break him, he becomes a symbol. But if you acknowledge him, she paused, he becomes ours. The strategic implications settled heavily over the court. Elias stared at her in disbelief. She wasn't just protecting him. She was thinking politically, calculating, transforming the narrative. You presume much, the Emperor said. I presume. Evolution, Liara replied. Empires fall when they fail to adapt. The chamber fell silent again, not from shock this time, but contemplation. The Xarveth prided themselves on superiority. But superiority that refused to evolve had doomed empires before them. The Emperor turned his gaze to Elias. And you, human, if spared, would you kneel? Elias met his eyes steadily. No. A collective intake of breath swept the hall. Liara's grip tightened slightly, but she did not look surprised. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. You would refuse even under her protection. I would serve Earth, Elias answered. Always. There was no defiance in his tone, just certainty. For the first time, something shifted in the Emperor's expression. Not anger, not mockery, respect. You see, Liara said quietly. Unbreakable. The Emperor slowly returned to the base of his throne. Very well, he declared at last. By the ancient law of claim, Captain Elias Ward falls under royal protection. His execution is suspended. Shock rippled outward again. He will remain within the palace as a strategic advisor under Princess Liara's authority. It was a compromise. It preserved imperial dignity while avoiding martyrdom. It transformed an enemy into an asset. The guards deactivated the gravitic restraints. Elias remained standing, free but surrounded, uncertain whether he had been saved or relocated to a different battlefield entirely. As the court slowly began to disperse in hushed conversation, Liara stepped slightly in front of him, her posture subtle but unmistakably protective. You are not my prisoner, she murmured softly so only he could hear. And I am not your captor. Then what are we? He asked. Her eyes flickered with quiet intensity. The beginning of something neither of our worlds expected. Beyond the palace walls, whispers of the event spread quickly through imperial networks. The human who had refused to kneel, the princess who had claimed him, the emperor who had spared him. Across occupied human colonies, resistance cells intercepted fragments of the broadcast. They did not see surrender. They saw survival. They saw infiltration. They saw possibility. Within weeks, subtle policy shifts began emerging from the Xarveth throne. Reduced civilian crackdowns, diplomatic envoys sent instead of bombardments, collaborative resource treaties proposed rather than demanded. Some called it weakness. Others called it strategy. But deep within the palace, two figures stood often at panoramic windows overlooking alien stars. One born of conquest, one born of defiance. Not allies yet, not enemies anymore. Empires had been built on fear for centuries. Perhaps, for the first time, one might be reshaped by respect. And it all began with a whisper. He's mine. And a throne room that fell silent.